no one wants to go up against White and Case, a Bankers Trust Company, the Federal Reserve Bank in New York. And the Federal Reserve Bank, when the purchase of Bankers Trust Company took place in June of 1999, we had a source inside the Federal Reserve in April and May of '99. And they were pushing for Bankers Trust Company to be cleaned up. In other words, and one of the things they were going to clean up was they pushed for the McCormick estate. The bank refused to do it. White and Case was involved in it too, we understand. And another newspaper, through a FOIL request, found out that they had listed the estate of Edmund J. McCormick as a liability involving Bankers Trust Company and White and Case. And that was on the internet, and it was also in a publication, Inner City Press. But it's like punching a pillow. These people are above the law. They're omnipotent, or they think they're omnipotent.
Yeah, well, the system lets them get away with it.
The system lets them get away with it.
Okay.
That's part of the
now,
problem.
Susan, let's backtrack a little bit. When this was first coming down, you know, the first hearings for the will were being conducted. About that time, the executors via the bank executors were prompting you to sell a certain art collection. Can you talk about the art collection, how it came to the family, and then what happened?
Well, my husband and I actually collected the paintings, and he left them directly to me with my home and my...
What are these paintings?
They're 19th century English art, 19th century British art. And he had a very fine collection. According to the Forbes, it was the top in the United States at the time. And
which artist? About a few of them?
Albert Moore, Tissot was another name, Grimshaw,
Redgrave.
Tissot, Redgrave, yeah.
Elma Tadema.
Yeah, Elma Tadema.
And the collection was worth how much?
Well,
market value?
This is a big question when it comes to art, you know.
Yes, it is.
You know, I think they underestimated it because who knows.
You said they had a fire, they then, after they convinced you to sign, because you trusted them to some extent at that point, right?
Well, I really couldn't understand why the art collection had to be sold. I mean, after all, there was liquid money there. There was plenty of money in real estate. My husband intended me to keep this collection.
Well, you think these lawyers are acting on your best, you know, on your best behavior? You think at first, as a naive person,
right?
But really, they're scheming to get you to dump something like that, dump that art collection, and then maybe their cronies are involved with buying it.
Well, I'm sure.
At a fire sale kind of situation.
D.D. Brooks was the head of Sotheby's at that time, and she had a luncheon for me, and they were all there, and of course I was very quiet. This was right after my husband died. You're mourning, you're not with it. I was wondering what was going on. And they were all doing their business deals with D.D. Brooks at the table.
They were taking advantage of a naive widow at that time.
So they set the price. I thought it was very low, and then they call you in before the auction, and they say, well, you know, maybe you better lower them a little bit, you know, you better lower. And there sits Bankers Trust fella and Win Rutherford of White and Case, and they look at me and say, well, you know, you better lower them. You know, it was such a set-up thing in my mind that after I looked at the whole thing, I thought this was a setup. Because certain people, Metropolitan Art Museum was interested in one painting when my husband was living, which I didn't know. I didn't know about it. Well, I'm sure they were writing Sotheby's, and they made sure they got that painting for a certain amount of money. But, I mean, I'm saying this is definitely the way it appears. And it was very upsetting to me because I lost an art collection that my husband said you can sell paintings as you want and as you need money and as you live. And besides, music is the same as the art world. It introduces you to certain people. You're in another world, even my music world. I mean, after all, President Sharansky invited me to Georgia, Russia, and I was their guest. His daughter chauffeured me in Georgia, Russia. And that's how you meet these people, is through your music, because art and music is a great drawing card. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed that world. But these people have destroyed both of my worlds, including my music world. They've destroyed my whole career and my life. How can they give me back 22 years of my life that they've taken? Now, I trusted them, and look what they've done. They even had an embezzlement in the estate by the stepson in regard to real estate.
By the stepson's office.
Stepson's office, I mean. When the embezzlement took place, they spent so much time trying to figure out how to do it that they got none of the money back for the estate. In fact, the stepson had called me and said, you know, half the money is yours, Suzanne, that was taken. And then they found out that the books were burned to the real estate. And so I finally said, shouldn't you subpoena the books and go to the judge about this? Oh no, they said the judge doesn't like to hear these things. He doesn't like to have these problems. I mean...
Well, that's too bad for the judge. I mean, it's your case. It's you who is looking for a remedy. Now, let's go back to one of the central issues of this whole discussion, the will. What happened with the will? Your husband wrote a will. What was put in it, and what did the courts do with that will? And I'm going to jump to Patrick to add to your comment.
Well, you know, I'm just going to make it brief. I think they simply tossed the will. I mean, if you read the will, it's very plain about how my husband wanted me to be taken care of and live the life that we were living. And it's very plain in the will, the whole thing. And it's completely none of it. As far as I can see, none of it they stood by.
How can they destroy a will, Patrick? I mean, a will's supposed to be ironclad. You can't just, the judges can't say, oh, no, I don't want the will anymore.
Well, it's not just the judges. You see, you can't blame the judges totally because they're also manipulated. They're manipulated by the lawyers and they're manipulated by the banks.
Oh, come on, he's a judge. You can't be tossing out a will.
What they do is very simple. They ignore it, okay? Or they say, look,
well, that's illegal. That's just outright fraud and it's illegal.
Listen, these people are not afraid of, if they control the system, the fox is in charge of the hen house. And they all work in collusion. And that's the way it works.
But we have federal laws to protect such behavior by a judge.
Well, you go into
and that's bad behavior by a judge.
You go into a federal court and it's worse than bad, and you're right, it is worse than bad. It's criminal behavior, in my opinion.
Yeah, but a judge can be impeached for bad behavior. That's what the Constitution of the United States says.
You go into a federal court, and they have something called a probate exemption. And in other words, they don't want probate cases in the federal court. Now, they've opened it up a little bit, but you have to be very careful how you do it. They want to keep this probate thing in the probate courts where they can control it and milk it. And that's what they do with the states. They milk it, one way or another.
And they assign their own trustees and they really milk it.
Well, you got a situation where they'll put in guardians to be a guardian and control the assets. And that's one way they do it. Now the trusts are under the direction of the surrogate judge. They're the ones that take care of trusts. So they're in a position where they're controlling money. And it's the amount of money, what banks the money goes into, that's all part of their, and the lawyers are involved in it. It's like an incest club. And it's a very small, little, tight group of people. And they control a lot of money and a lot of assets. And that's the way they like it.
Well, they can also deplete an asset by 50%, 75% just on their fees. Right?
Well,
assigning a trustee, and the trustees
the fees,
claiming $100,000 here, $200,000 there.
Well, the fees are supposedly reviewed by the surrogate judge and approved by the surrogate judge. But again, who's to say what goes on? I mean, I know of a friend of mine who recently died, who was a beneficiary of a trust, and he was denied, the bank denied that he was the beneficiary of the trust for over 25 years. And only by accident did he learn that he was the beneficiary of a trust when the bank sent an accounting, when a lawyer from a bank sent an accounting to him by mistake. And then he began to ask questions, and the lawyer demanded the accounting back and said, you shouldn't have seen that. And he began to investigate, and he got a lawyer, and finally the bank gave up the fact that he was the beneficiary of a trust. If you're the beneficiary of a trust, you have to receive, at the minimum, a yearly accounting paper that says how much money is in the trust, what the fees were, and so on, what the assets are. He never got it. And what was done? Was the bank sanctioned? Were the lawyers sanctioned? No.
That's criminal activity again, would you say?
In my opinion, I believe it's criminal activity, but you know, the law has definitions on all these things.
Right. It's conspiracy, wouldn't you say?
I would say it's more than conspiracy. Okay, they're engaged in basically appropriating the assets. Now, why did the bank deny that he was a beneficiary of the trust? Well, one of the reasons, in my opinion, is the fact that he would then be able to get trust money out of that trust, and it would lower the amount of the trust. So if the trust was worth $10 million and he was able to take money out, it might have brought it down to $8 million or $9 million. And then the bank and the attorney, who was a trustee also, would not be getting their fees as high. In other words, they got a percentage of that trust. That's all the more reason why they want to keep the trust as high as they can. They don't want to deplete a trust by giving beneficiaries trust money.
All right, Suzanne, how much money have you actually gotten so far from that of the money that was
No,
due?
it's almost unbelievable.
What percentage is probably a better...
No, actually, I haven't gotten. I think I got $145,000 in insurance policy.
That's it.
That's it. But the point is, and I got the art collection, of course, in the house and the co-op, but that was from my husband directly. So, of course, some of the money from the art collection is used for all the attorneys. Now, also, I learned that, of course, an executor, which I am, my attorney's fees are supposed to be paid from the estate. I'm not supposed to personally hand out my own money when I'm fighting for an estate to get justice for the money my husband made.
So what happened there? So why wasn't it done correctly?
Because the surrogate court, they're the arbiters of whether the attorneys get money, and the surrogate court is mum on many things, and that's one of them. Yeah. In addition to that,
the attorneys never fight for you to get money from the estate.
In addition to that, you have a situation where
Okay, Susan. So basically, you've gotten less than or around $100,000 maybe so far.
$145,000.
And how much have the lawyers pulled out of the pot?
It cost me in total probably almost $1.5 million.
$1.5 million in lawyers. The lawyers have gotten $1.5 million, and you haven't gotten anywhere. You haven't found any kind of justice yet, with some of your claims, which seem to be extremely valid. Okay, so Patrick.
Well, the other unfortunate truth is that the emperor has no clothes, because the IRS 706 estate tax return says that there was a marital deduction taken, and approximately in the amount of $11 million. Now, that was the question that the agent, the IRS agent, the estate tax agent, asked Mrs. McCormick. Did you get your $11 million?
Right.
Well, she didn't get the $11 million because they didn't give her They claim they gave her approximately $4 million. And what that was the art collection and her home and her co-op. And that's what they list. However, the art collection did not sell for the amount that they indicated was the figure it was worth. That's another little fact. There was a loss there.
Well, the $11 million should have been largely liquid.
Well, it wasn't, okay? And they weren't going to, they have failed to give her. Now, we've been advised by a tax attorney that that may be tax fraud. In other words,
Yeah.
they've said the IRS was not allowed to tax the difference between the $4 million and the $11 million. So there is a possibility there's tax fraud there, and the IRS has been cheated out of money, compliments of Bankers Trust Company and their law firm of White and Case.
I want you to look right in the lens, addressing the IRS, and ask them how they can help.
We would like the IRS to look into it. The IRS has been cooperative in the past when we've written letters to them requesting detailed information, and the agent, who unfortunately has passed on, was very supportive of us. He handled the estate from the inception through the settlement, and he understood it for a lot of it, and he shared a lot of knowledge with us.
Well, they can bring criminal charges.
I'm sure they can bring criminal charges, but again, you get into the avenue, the politics of it. And when we first spoke to people 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, about Bankers Trust Company and Deutsche Bank and the criminal activities they were involved in, known, admitted criminal activities, people looked at us like we were out of our minds. Their eyes would glaze over and they'd say, well, that's a bank. They can't be bad. They can't be anything but good. But now there's a new vision of these banksters as a result of the Wall Street debacle, as a result of the mortgage debacle. And by the way, Deutsche Bank recently, within the past year, was indicted and paid admitted criminal acts involving mortgages and paid a fine of over $300 million to the federal government. Bankers Trust Company, as I said, became a convicted federal felon on July 27th of 1999. They obtained a certificate of relief over 4 months later from the state of New York Parole Board, which was a get-out-of-jail-free card.
All right, let's talk about that. What's going on here with these certificates of disability? Whose disability?
Well, the disability, it's a euphemism for a felony. In other words, these people are convicted federal felons.
So the disability is their crimes.
Absolutely.
That they've been convicted of, and now they're asking for relief.
They're asking for relief, and the relief is they would like to be able to maintain a banking entity in the state of New York. And they attempted to get it immediately after they pled guilty in March of 1999, and they were declined. They were told that they had to be convicted, sentenced, and they attempted to get a certificate of relief issued simultaneously.
Show us the document now with the dates in question. Can you?
I can't. I have to start.
Okay, so how many of these binders do you have of evidence? And
well, the salient documents are in binders. There are over 10 binders that contain information that we've acquired with a lot of due diligence and hard work.
Mm-hmm.
But the
and they're very compelling documents. They're evidence of impropriety and even illegalities.
Through a... Are we live now?
Yes,
Live in color?
I actually am on camera.
Okay.
So did you find the document?
Yes, we have
the
the
document.
document.
Why don't you hold it up to the camera?
Well, I'd like to just preface it by stating that we filed a FOIL request with the New York State Parole Board, and they denied us and tried to get rid of us. And we continued, and with the Open Government Committee, we were granted all the records. The counsel for the parole board sent over 450 pages of documents.
And you have that letter right there, right below the other ones, right?
Well, what I have in my hand now is a certificate of relief that was issued on December the 2nd of 1999, and it indicates that the date of sentencing was July 26th of 1999. I stand corrected.
Can you just hold that up?
I believe that I had previously stated that the conviction was on the 27th of July. It's the 26th.
Yeah. Do you consider this process and this document as unethical?
I do, and I question its legality because it was issued by the New York State Parole Board, which is an entity of New York State. And how can New York State absolve or give a get-out-of-jail-free card effectively
to a felon
for a federal offense?
Mm-hmm. So it's really wrong jurisdiction.
Well, that's part of it. I mean, they have, what rights does the state of New York have? Here's a copy of the letter that is from the counsel for the parole board, which gave us, after we fought for 6 months, all the copies on the parole board. Now, one of the salient documents that we've gleaned from this pile of documents is an internal memorandum from the parole board. Now, when Bankers Trust Company pled guilty in March of 1999, they pled guilty to the figure of $19.1 million.
Okay, hold it while the helicopter goes by, please.
One of the salient documents that the parole board gave us was an internal memorandum dated October 12th of 1999. And it states, Sullivan & Cromwell is sending me data on the remaining $36 million. Upon reception, a final report can be done. Total amount inappropriately taken was $55.1 million. The plea deal covered $19.1. Right. Now, in federal,
how can a plea deal cover 19.1 and there be $55 million really in question? What the hell is going on?
Well, that's a very good question, and I believe that the U.S. Attorney's Office and the federal court and the Federal Reserve Bank are people that should be answering these questions. In addition to that...
On what venue?
Well, on a federal venue. In addition to that, Bankers Trust Company had ERISA money, pension fund money, and they had to get an exemption to manage this money because they're felons. They became felons, and they applied for an exemption in early June or late May of 1999. They were given the exemption. It's published in the Federal Register for the 27th of July. Now remember, they were convicted on the 26th of July of 1999. However, the exemption is signed July 24, I believe. And how can you get an exemption from the federal government to manage money, pension money, billions of dollars of money, before you're convicted?
Unbelievable. We'll have to stay tuned for part 2 coming shortly on this continuing saga of the McCormick case. And so I thank you, Patrick, for coming.
The Odyssey. The Emperor has no clothes.
Okay. So I want to thank you, Susan McCormick, for allowing me to videotape you on this incredible story. And would you like to make it some kind of closing statement?
Well, I want to thank you for being interested in trying to expose what this whole thing is with different people. You know, this judicial business and the dishonesty and injustice that's going on. I mean,
no other widow
no other widow should go what I've gone through. It's been absolutely horrendous.
And you're really doing this for the sake of others.
Well, I'm doing it for others, sure, and I hope that maybe someone will wake up as to what they have to do.
Okay, thank you very much, you two.